Have you ever heard of a case where someone disappears without a trace, leaving behind nothing but chilling clues? Imagine this: two brothers, one vanishing from their shared room in the dead of night. What happened to him? Where did he go? And why does the house still whisper his name? But before we dive into the mystery, let me ask you, do you believe in the supernatural? Have you ever felt like something, or someone, was watching you? If you're curious about what really happened to Jason Stevens, hit that subscribe button, and let's unravel the secrets together. Because trust me, you won't believe what we're about to uncover. It was a warm summer evening in 1990 when Jason and Ethan Stevens, two young boys just 7 and 8 years old, shared a room in the old suburban house they called home. Their room, tucked away in the back corner of the house, was filled with the familiar comfort of childhood. A bunk bed, scattered toys, a bookshelf teeming with adventure novels, and an old window that overlooked the darkening backyard. The brothers, always close, had never minded sharing their space. It was their haven, their secret world, where anything could happen. That particular night, however, something was different. Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on it. He had heard the usual creaks of the old house, but tonight, there was a strange stillness to the air. The windows rattled lightly, as if something outside was pressing against them. Jason, ever the brave one, reassured Ethan, telling him it was just the wind. But Ethan, wide-eyed and unsettled, couldn't shake the sensation that something, or someone, was watching them. As the night stretched on, Ethan, feeling the heavy weight of unease, struggled to sleep. The room felt colder, almost unnatural. He tossed and turned, catching fleeting glimpses of shadows flickering just outside his peripheral vision. The soft hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound that seemed to cut through the silence. When morning came, Ethan awoke to find Jason missing. His bed was perfectly made, as if untouched. Jason was gone, vanished. No sign of a struggle, no trail leading out. The house was eerily quiet, and the more Ethan searched, the more the silence seemed to deepen, swallowing any trace of his brother. The room, their room, remained still, too still. As the years passed, the Stevens family tried to move on from the tragic disappearance of young Jason. Ethan, now an adult, often found himself haunted by the memory of that night, his brother's absence, the unanswered questions, and the strange, suffocating emptiness that seemed to follow them. But it wasn't just Jason's disappearance that plagued Ethan, it was the room. Despite the family moving to a new house, the room Jason and Ethan had shared remained untouched, as though time had frozen within its walls. The door to the room was often left slightly ajar, and Ethan couldn't help but feel drawn to it whenever he visited his parents. There was something about the place that unsettled him. It was as if the room itself carried a secret, one that Ethan wasn't allowed to uncover. He remembered the strange whispers he had once heard as a child, soft voices murmuring in the dark when no one else was around. Ethan had tried to push these thoughts away, telling himself that it was just a child's imagination. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. One rainy afternoon, with no one around, he stood at the threshold of that room once again. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness. As he stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The familiar creak of the wooden floorboards beneath his feet only added to the tension in the air. A dusty box sat quietly in the corner of the room, something he didn't remember ever seeing. His pulse quickened. What was it? Why had it been hidden away? Ethan's curiosity got the best of him as he approached the dusty box in the corner. His heart raced, the memories of his childhood, and the chilling sense of something lurking in the room, flooding back. He knelt down, his fingers trembling slightly as he pried open the old, creaking lid. The moment the box opened, a faint, musty smell hit him, as if the box had been sealed away for decades. Inside, he found a collection of old photographs, some neatly stacked, others crumpled and faded with time. Most of the photographs were ones he recognized, Jason's smiling face, captured during their countless childhood adventures. But as his eyes scanned the photos more closely, one image in particular caught his attention. It was a picture of him and Jason, standing side by side in the very room where they had spent their childhood. Their smiles were wide, their faces full of innocence. But behind Jason, something strange lurked in the corner of the photograph. A dark, shadowy shape that seemed to distort the air around it. It was faint, almost invisible at first glance, but upon closer inspection, it was unmistakable. A shadow that didn't belong. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He flipped through more photographs, his hands shaking as he uncovered more unsettling images. Each picture was eerily similar, Jason, always smiling, but behind him, that same shadowy figure, just barely visible, lurking, watching. Then, he found it, a photograph of Jason, alone in the room. But this time, there was no smile. Instead, Jason's face appeared strained, eyes wide in terror, as if he had seen something no one else could. Something that had been hiding in that room all along. Ethan felt his stomach churn. What was happening here? And why had Jason never told him about this? The truth was becoming more and more elusive, like a puzzle with missing pieces that refused to fit. Driven by a sense of dread and curiosity, Ethan knew he couldn't stop now. The photographs only raised more questions, but the unease gnawing at him demanded answers. The discovery of the strange shadow in the pictures, the figure that seemed to haunt Jason, made it clear that whatever had happened to his brother wasn't just an accident. It was something far darker, something rooted in that room. Ethan spent the following days obsessively combing through the room, hoping to find something, anything, that might explain the mystery of Jason's disappearance. As he moved aside furniture, he noticed a peculiar draft coming from the wall behind the bunk bed. The chill seemed to seep through the wood, cold and unnatural. His pulse quickened. The room, still and silent, felt almost alive with anticipation. With his heart pounding in his chest, he pushed the bed aside and discovered something startling, an old, rusted metal handle partially hidden beneath the wallpaper. His fingers trembled as he reached for it, pulling at the handle with all his strength. The wall groaned in protest as a hidden compartment creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway. The air inside was thick with dust and must, and as Ethan stepped inside, the temperature dropped even further, the darkness pressing in around him like a physical weight. He moved cautiously down the passage, the silence oppressive. At the end of the passage, he found a small, hidden room, its walls covered in strange symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. In the center of the room was an old, wooden chest, half buried beneath layers of dirt and cobwebs. The chest creaked open with a sinister groan as Ethan's hands, almost against his will, lifted the lid. Inside, among decayed clothing and forgotten trinkets, lay something more horrifying, another photograph. But this one was different. It wasn't just Jason's face. There, beside him, stood a shadowy figure, its form indistinct, like a dark silhouette. And in the final picture, taken just moments before his disappearance, Ethan could clearly see Jason's hand, reaching out from behind the figure, as though trying to escape something much larger and far more dangerous than any child could comprehend. The air around him seemed to hum with a dark energy, and Ethan, shaking, began to understand the terrible truth. Whatever had taken Jason wasn't just a ghost, it was something that had been waiting, watching, for years. And it had never left. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the photograph in the chest, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The implications were too much to bear. Jason hadn't just disappeared, he had been taken by something far darker. The shadowy figure, the whispered warnings in Jason's journal, all pointed to the same conclusion. But as the eerie silence enveloped him, something far more sinister began to unfold. The room, which had seemed so still just moments ago, now felt alive with an unexplainable presence. The air grew colder, and the very walls seemed to close in on him. He could feel it, a weight, pressing down on his chest, suffocating him. His eyes darted nervously, and his heart raced with terror as the faint whispering, which he had only half-consciously heard before, grew louder. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't his imagination. Ethan. The voice, soft, familiar, cut through the stillness, sending chills down his spine. It was Jason's voice. But it wasn't Jason. The tone was wrong, the words laden with an unnatural, hollow quality. Ethan spun around, his body freezing in terror as he saw the figure standing at the doorway. At first glance, it seemed like Jason. But it wasn't. The figure was translucent, its edges blurred and flickering like a shadow cast by flickering light. Its eyes were hollow, an empty void that seemed to reach deep into Ethan's soul. The form was unmistakable. It was Jason, but it was also not Jason. The thing standing before him was something far worse, something that had waited, trapped in the room for years, feeding on the memory of a vanished boy. "You shouldn't have come back," the figure whispered, its voice full of a twisted kind of sorrow. "You shouldn't have come back to wake it." Ethan stumbled backward, his mind reeling. The presence in the room grew stronger, more tangible. His heart hammered in his chest as he tried to escape, but the room seemed to stretch, the walls closing in around him. Every step felt heavier, as if the very air was thick with dread. The darkness wasn't just in the corners of the room, it was in the very fabric of the house itself, reaching out for him. The last thing Ethan saw was Jason's ghostly figure reaching out to him, a hand that seemed to stretch impossibly long, grasping for his own. The walls seemed to pulse, the air buzzing with a cold, electric charge. And then, nothing. The room was silent once more. Years later, when Ethan's body was discovered in that same room, the door was still locked, the room still frozen in time. The photographs, the journal, the hidden passage, it all remained. But Jason, his brother, was still gone. And the shadowy figure that had claimed him in 1990? It was waiting, patient, for the next soul to wander too close, to awaken the darkness that had never left. The Stevens family, now long gone, left behind an empty house. But the room, Jason's room, remains undisturbed. And the whispers, they say, still call out to those who dare to enter.